Hi there. This is Dr. John Whitcomb talking about nitric oxide and COVID, or all infections, influenza, colds, any infection. Let me explain. The first discovery around COVID was that folks that in the ICUs had ARDS, or acute respiratory distress syndrome, and the folks that survived were found to have higher levels of nitric oxide. That was where it was first discussed. The next discovery that came out, there were literature showing that when you add nitric oxide to cultures of viruses, particularly the COVID virus, you could stop replication of the virus in its tracks. That was basic science, petri dish stuff. Okay, well, let's progress. We know that the virus wreaks havoc in the endothelium, causing localized clotting. But a common observation in the early stages of the COVID pandemic was folks had super low levels of oxygen. Did you know you can't pick up oxygen and carry it in a red cell unless nitric oxide is attached to a critical receptor? So carrying oxygen in your blood vessels requires nitric oxide right there. Not only that, nitric oxide is what activates your macrophages that gobble up viruses. In fact, you need it to get that started. Well, that's interesting. Now, SARS, COVID, influenza, they all have insufficient nitric oxide that seems to be going on. That they seem to play a role in all of those. So you could make the argument that COVID is actually an endothelial disease, and the spike protein is actually causing a damage in the epithelial processes that overwhelm the ability of blood vessels to relax and dilate. Well, what does nitric oxide do? It makes your blood vessels dilate. That's interesting. So, how have we proven it? Well, the nitric oxide discoveries all came along just as the COVID pandemic was ending. But a study of 650 people given nitric oxide all showed not one side effect. Everybody survived, and they had 14% higher oxygen. That's all they showed. It was proof of concept, but at least there was no side effects. And then the pandemic effectively came to a close, and so they published the article. Well, the pandemic is not over. COVID's going to be with us forever. You should have nitric oxide to protect you. That's what I have. In fact, I have purchased N101 Company's nitric oxide lozenges. They're the first to market. They actually taste pretty good. You put it on your tongue, and you pick it twice a day, and you'll raise your nitric oxide levels up. You can buy a nitric oxide testing kit to see what your levels were, and I was horribly low. I'm now still low, but I'm not horribly low. I also stopped using mouthwash, because when you use mouthwash, you completely wipe out the bacteria in your tongue that make nitric oxide. If you have nitric oxide at home and you have heart disease, you better be on nitric oxide before you're on aspirin. Forget the aspirin story. Well, maybe aspirin may be useful, but nitric oxide will prevent the damage to your heart much more than aspirin. Nitric oxide in your heart, nitric oxide in COVID. This story has legs that we need to pay attention to. We're going to be hearing more and more about how to increase our nitric oxide. Pay attention, but start taking it now. Dr. Whitcomb, News and Nutrition. Nitric oxide, good for your heart.